My name is Anthony Fennell. I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved to Philadelphia approximately 22 years ago. I had a drug addiction in Jersey, but it wasn't as bad as it is out here. I got out here, and I didn't really want to be out here, but I tried to make the best out of it. I got caught up in some things. First drug case, when I got that drug case, I started using more than I frequently used before. And from that, I lost my daughter. I lost the custody of my sons. Me and my ex-wife, we divorced. My mom passed away because of this addiction. Growing up in New Jersey, things weren't as bad as it seemed. I grew from the suburbs, so things were pretty much good. I dibbled and dabbled with drugs here and there. Nothing big though. Weed here, alcohol, probably a little hard or something like that. But my addiction didn't turn over until I got into Philadelphia. I moved down to North Philly and I started hustling dope. And during that hustling the dope, I found myself sniffing a bag here and there, doing the night shit. And it became a habit. My ex-wife would be like, why are you scratching? Why are you scratching? I'm like, I'm tired, trying to hide it from her, so she didn't find out. I wanted to be a secret, but I knew that secret wouldn't hold itself for long. I eventually went back to jail, for another drug charge. Ended up getting out, and when I got out, my wife took my kids and she left. And at the time I was thinking like, it was something that she did. I wasn't thinking about what I did. But now that I have a chance to look back at the whole situation, I was hiding. I was wearing a mask. I didn't want them to see me for who I was becoming. My life wasn't bad though. My life wasn't bad, it was good, but I always had a problem with authority. I had a problem with, people telling me what I could and couldn't do. So that made me go harder doing my own thing. You know what I'm saying?